Anyway, hello everyone. My name is Adam Bentley. I'm a planner with ECICOG, and I want to thank you for joining us today. With me around the table is a number of our staff in housing, and I would love to be able to do an introduction of them. And in fact, we'll do that in a moment. But a little bit of a maybe some meeting mechanics here. We're going to go over a number of different programs and some items related to our CDBG programs. In the course of this conversation, you may have questions that come up. Please go ahead and write your questions in the chat box, and we will get to that. We'll get to those at the end during our Q&A session. I'm going to share my screen here so we can get this rolling and see if I can successfully do this or not. Shared. Team, can we see my screen? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So anyway, welcome everyone. Like I said, this is my name is Adam Bentley. I'm with ECICOG, and this is the second webinar of our webinar series covering CDBG programs. Today we're going to talk a little bit. We'll do our introductions. We'll do a quick brief overview of ECICOG, an overview of the CDBG programs that we intend to cover today, and then we will get into some questions and answers here at the end. And if we don't have very many of them, I'll probably be asking some questions because I'm a curious guy like that. First off, who we are. ECICOG is a regional planning organization. We're actually created by our counties, our member counties, overseen by a board of directors who are oftentimes in the nonprofit or public arena. We have different departments that help plan for different components of community needs. That could be, I'll go into some of that, but that can be community development, that can be housing, that could be environmental services. So we kind of touch on a lot of aspects of local government and planning for items surrounding local government. Our primary counties are those in the dark blue, although we do have some services that we offer in Cedar and Tama counties as well. But for the most part, the brunt of our services and operations exist in Benton, Lynn, Jones, Iowa, Johnson, and Washington counties. I did mention a little bit about some of our programs and departments. It's a little tough to see with the lightness of the text there, but everything from transportation to economic development, housing, community development. We really do our staff really has professional services in these areas, and so we like to be able to be that regional organization that can assist some of our communities with needs that they would have that maybe they don't have themselves. But today we are going to cover a number of different CDBG programs out there, and it's important to remember that there's a lot of intricacy with some of these programs, but we'll try to make it as easy to understand as possible. And like I said, if you have any questions, please in the chat box, go ahead and ask those questions, and we'll get to them at the end. I should probably do introductions because I almost forgot about that. So I'm going to have us do a quick round around the room, starting with Brittany. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, my name is Brittany Rempe. I am the communications specialist with ECICOG, and I'll be monitoring the chat. And if you have any technical problems or anything like that as well, just put it in there and I will see it.
Tracy.
Tracy Achenbach, I'm the Community Development and Housing Director here at ECICOG.
Mark.
Mark Culver, I'm a housing specialist at ECICOG. I do all the inspections and write work specs and have all the interactions with the contractors for all the programs that we would deal with.
Tom.
I'm Tom Gruis. I'm a planner and community development specialist at ECICOG.
Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula Mitchell, and I am a planner housing grant specialist here at ECICOG.
And Harrison.
Hi, I'm Harrison Freund, and I'm a planning fellow at ECICOG.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here, and we'll get going. So Tracy, I'm going to go ahead and let you lead off on these slides, and you just let me know if I get too far behind with moving the slides forward, but I'll try to be good about it.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I don't know if I like not being able to see who I'm talking to, but that's okay. I can adjust. So most of us that are on here attended a CDBG workshop with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. It's been about 10 days ago. And so we learned that they opened up the application period for some of the grants, and which was why we wanted to do this webinar immediately. And so that's some of that information that we learned at the workshop 10 days ago. We're going to try and convey to you today. You heard about us, so we can move on. So, you know, CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grants. A lot of you probably already know that. They are actually funded from the federal government through HUD. And the intention of them is to be able to help communities, local communities in many areas, affordable housing, downtown revitalization, or like water sewer infrastructure. They also have a community facilities improvements as well. So HUD normally funds, normally they give funding automatically to what they call entitlement cities, and those are based on population. And then the balance of the state goes to the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and then they determine their priorities and make it available to our local communities and counties. Only local governments are eligible to apply for CDBG dollars. So the intent of HUD, it has to do, anytime you use CDBG dollars, they either have to benefit low to moderate income persons, has to aid in the prevention or elimination of slum or blight, or meet a urgency that a particular community has. So any of you that have worked with community development block programs know that there's a lot of regulations. Of course, the federal government's involved, and so there's a lot of detail to it, and that's one reason why it's handy that you have all of us, because we have experience with CDBG administration and can help cities through that process. So the first one we're going to talk about is upper story conversion. So this is intended for communities to apply for maybe it might be a particular building, or it may be more than that, but is to rehab unoccupiable, or, you know, the units in the upper story have to have been empty, which this is the big deal, has to be empty and not occupied for the 5 years previous to submitting your application to IEDA. Communities can apply for up to 500,000. You can do a maximum of 7 units. So the owner of the building has to agree that they're going to rent to low to moderate income individuals for a minimum of the 5 years. And so whatever the percentage is, they have to at least have more than half. So 51% of the renters have to be low to moderate income. But you can propose to do all of them that way, that all of the units are going to be that way. When you decide to do that, you're also agreeing to rent them at certain income or rental amounts. But at least 51% of them have to be rented to LMI. And then that percentage also determines how much of the project cost will cover you know, for the rental units, because it's going to be proportionate to whatever proportion the renters are going to be LMI. So that the contractor or the developer owner of the building also has to agree, also in the 3-year contract, that is when how much time you have to get the work done and get the units leased up to persons of low to moderate income. There's a lot of criteria that go into this project. There's a lot of extra, like if any of you are familiar with like owner occupied rehab or something like that, you know, we do not have guidelines in that you have to follow with this upper story conversion. So there's a lot of extra things that would have to be followed if you were to choose to do this program. Again, this deadline has a August 31st deadline. And so it will be a competitive grant. And so when we write the application for this one, it would need to be competitive with, because you don't know what you're competing with. So I would say you'll have to expect to have the owner of the building put in money. I know one of the criteria they look at is the local support for it. So probably the community would have to be ready to provide some funding for the upper story conversion as well. So before I move on, was there any questions or anything on this particular? Otherwise, I'll go on.
Yes, there is. If more than one building, does it have to be owned by the same person?
You know, as soon as that escaped my mouth, I thought, I don't know. I wondered that same thing. So I'm gonna guess not, but I don't know that for sure, but we can find out and get back to whoever it is that asked that question.
That was Derek Lumsden.
Of course it was. Okay, thank you for the question, Derek.
So Tracy, would you say that an application, in order to be competitive for this program, really is probably going to have to show joint, some level of financial collaboration between the private owner of the space, the local and the local government in order to leverage those funds from the state?
Yeah, you know, it's always tricky when you're applying for grant funds, that when you're going to be competitive, you never know what's going to make you more competitive. I have over the years defaulted to wanting to make sure that I show local participation in order to make sure it's a competitive app. But it's, you know, there's no set amount that they're saying that local communities would have to contribute towards it.
Okay. I don't see any other questions from anyone.
Okay, so one of the application processes that has urgency to it is the Homebuyer Assistance. So last year, IEDA for the first time made, well, I don't know if it's first time ever, but they made community development block grant funds available to be able to offer Homebuyer Assistance. The application period was opened the day of the workshop, so about 10 days ago, and they are taking applications now from communities for Homebuyer Assistance. So I think last year when they did this, we ended up I think we submitted applications within 5 weeks so that we made sure that the ones that we submitted were competitive, because they are going to fund applications for as long as they have funding. And that will be out of the housing piece completely. And so it's just important that if you think you're interested in wanting to do a Homebuyer Assistance program, that you think about, you know, that you act on that quickly. So the Homebuyer Assistance program has to benefit low to moderate income home buyers. The amount of assistance they'll offer is up to 50% of the lender required down payment, closing costs of up to $3,500, and then up to $300 toward the home inspection fee. They will also pay an additional $5,500. Mark would have to go do an inspection of the home to determine if there were any lead hazards. If it was a home that was older, he would have to determine whether there were any lead hazards. And then if you had a radon test done, that is not paid with grant dollars, but if you had one done and needed to remediate that, both of those, you know, lead remediation and radon remediation could be done for up to $5,500 on that house you are purchasing. So a city would apply for the funds. A city can ask for a maximum to assist 5 households. So we're anticipating that if there are some places where we wouldn't use the maximum amount that we've asked for, that maybe there would be funds left over, we could do one more house, but the initial application to IEDA has to be for a maximum of 5 households, and the maximum award is $211,750. Now, there was something I was going to say, and it's just gone out of my mind. So I don't know if there are any questions in particular about the Homebuyer Assistance. We did, I know what I was going to say. So last year we submitted 3 applications, 2 on behalf of cities and 1 on behalf of Washington County for Homebuyer Assistance. So if you're interested in this, please talk to us. Paula right now is administering the 3 that we have funded. And I don't know, Brittany, if there are any questions or comments about the Homebuyer Assistance.
Nope, I'm not seeing any.
So would this be a situation, Tracy, where a community would reach out to us and say, hey, you know, I'm interested in offering this type of assistance in my community? Would they then identify a particular group of housing and then, you know, talk to those individuals, or how would that look potentially?
No, so the application would go in and propose that you were going to assist LMI home buyers, and then you would, and then if you were funded, you would make that announcement.
Okay.
So one of the things, Adam, that you have asked in the past is just to comment on the issues that the current program is having. And so I thought maybe Paula could speak to that because she's been working on the 3 that were funded last year.
Sure. Yep. Sounds great.
Yeah, so the main considerations that we would recommend a community be comfortable with are 1, just knowing that there's a sufficient population of low to moderate income prospective home buyers who would be interested and qualified to purchase housing through the program. And the other consideration would be right now, because of COVID and derecho impacts, we're seeing a trend that the housing inventory for sale is pretty limited. So a community would just want to be comfortable that they would have enough inventory hitting the market for sale that they would be able to complete the grant during the time frame.
Great.
Yes, and that's one thing I didn't say is you would have 2 years to expend your dollars. And they're being sort of demanding about that, I think, for this round. Last year, they're giving us some leniency because of the situation of derecho and COVID, but I'm not sure they'll continue to do that. But it's a 2-year period you would have to be able to offer to your residents homebuyer assistance and then close on those projects.
Wonderful. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so we'll keep it going.
Okay, so then the other section for the housing that they're offering is probably similar to what people think about as owner occupied rehab. This one is, they have changed it a bit, and this one is also one that you need to act on immediately, and more so than even the down payment assistance, because we have to identify the low to moderate income homeowners prior to submitting the application to IEDA. So we also have to begin the environmental review process and have that ready to be published at the time if you were awarded funds. So this one has even more urgency than the Homebuyer Assistance one. You can apply for up to 6 homes in this program. They have, IEDA has now partitioned them out into, they have different program areas. One is architectural barrier removal, one is energy efficiency improvement, and one is exterior improvements. Now, last year, Mark and I decided that the ones that we would submit for rehab, we would propose exterior improvements program. Because of COVID, we thought that made the most sense. So we submitted 3 applications last year on behalf of communities, which were all funded. And they all propose just exterior improvements. Now, the architectural and barrier and the energy efficiency can be combined. And so can the architectural barrier and the exterior improvements can be combined in one application to IEDA. But you cannot combine energy efficiency with exterior improvements. And I'll go into each of those, what each of those means. So the award that the city gets is a grant, but you will have the homeowner agree to a 5-year forgivable loan so that they'll stay at, so if they would be required to stay in the home for 5 years, and there it would actually become a grant after the 5 years. And if they had to move or they had to sell their home, then a portion of it would be forgiven wherever they are in the time frame of the 5-year forgivable loan period. Next one. So the first one, the architectural barrier removal one, is one that's intended to help homeowners do things to their home to be able to make them, to be able to live in them. And this, you have to, the homeowners or their family members would have to either meet, and I'm going to change, IEDA uses the word elderly, so that's what Harrison used when he created this presentation, but I like the word senior because I would meet that category. But so it would we would have to verify that the homeowners met the criteria of either being a senior or that there was someone severely disabled in their household. Okay. And then there are certain activities that they allow. And Harrison has listed some of those there. They're not exhaustive, but basically just think about things that would need to be done to a home in order for a senior or a person who is disabled to be able to live in that home. And some things that are not allowed, as he's listed here, you know, an expansion or new construction or the installation of elevators or luxury bathtubs or automated doors. And then the energy efficiency improvements part of this, if you were to apply for homes to receive energy efficiency improvements. So it does exactly what the title says. That's the intention, is to help people do these improvements. So there are some that have to be done as part, if you're going to do an energy efficiency program, as Harrison has listed there, the energy audit, smoke detectors, radon, and Energy Star thermostat. And then the next level would all have to be done, air sealing, insulation, and lighting, before you could go ahead and propose that you were also going to do electrical work, a more efficient water heater, heating and cooling, and the things that he has listed there. So then the last one is the exterior improvements one. This is the last, you know, what we had to do last year in the application is state, you know, which one of these we were going to do and how many homes. And then because we only did exterior improvements last year, we did not have to also submit proof of being a senior or proof of a person being disabled, but that would have to happen if you were going to apply for the previous two. But if you were to apply for the exterior improvements, this is really just talking about the outside of the home. So we're talking about siding, gutters, roofs, windows, some foundation repair, if outside stairways needed to be repaired. Those are the kind of activities that would be done in this program. Now, one of the things that we always have to do when CDBG dollars are involved is Mark is a lead certified inspector. So he would also have to, even though we are doing exterior improvements, he would still have to go in the home to determine if there were any lead hazards inside. And with each application, we also propose and ask for an amount of money to help us remediate lead hazards that may exist inside the home, as well as doing the outside stuff. So.
You good, Tracy?
Yeah, I was trying to see the question, but I don't think I'll worry about reading the questions at all. Okay, I'll just keep going.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, So the process, the one on the left is really the process for the Homebuyer Assistance. So if you or your community, your council would decide they want to do a Homebuyer Assistance application, we could start that process. If you think about what some of the things that Paula brought up about that you have the LMI potential buyers, that you have the properties. I've been in a lot of communities lately where they may have one home for sale. So that probably would not be a good, when you are looking at a 2-year period, you know, would you have substantial housing stock to be able to offer to buy? But we could start the application process, start gathering the information we need, start working through that process. And then once the funds are awarded, then we would identify the potential home buyers. Like then the city, or in this, and last year, in the case of Washington County, advertised the availability of the program. I think it's advertised on the economic development website for that county. It's advertised at the county. And then I think the radio station talked about it. So we got a lot of applications from Washington County. And then, so the homeowners are identified. And then really, I think where Paula stands right down with most of them, I think she's got one that's about to close, but with most of them, they're trying to find properties to purchase that would meet their affordability criteria, you know, just to be able to afford to live in them. But then we would start working through the process of using the funds. And the housing sustainability, so that's what you would think about as the owner occupied rehab, either exterior energy efficiency or architectural barrier removal. As I told you before, we have to identify the homeowners in advance. So if your city council would decide that they want to proceed forward, then probably the first step we would need to do is announce the program and see what kind of interest we get out there from the homeowners, see what it is that they might be needing, or the city could decide in advance the things that they want to do. For instance, the city could just say they want to do an exterior rehab program, and so announce it as such, and then announce it to the community, and then have homeowners submit applications. We would probably have those applications come to ECICOG so that they would know that our eyes are the ones seeing their personal information. And then once we had the homeowners identified, last year what we did was we processed first come, first serve, because it just slows the process down. If we get 20 applications and we have to determine if the city thought that they wanted to give priority to the lowest income first, we would have to verify everybody's income then before we could even move forward. And we were in the, time is of the essence with these programs, because the applications are being processed first come, first served by IEDA. So I think we would want the homeowner applications to be that way. And then as those are coming in and we know we're going to have enough, then we would start preparing the IEDA application that would go to them on behalf of the city. And then, of course, with both of these, there's a lot of things we have to do at a city council meeting prior to submitting the application. There's a lot of HUD requirements, federal requirements that we have to do. We provide you the forms and all of that for the city councils. I think that any city clerk that has worked with us on the last program would tell you that we provide a lot of the information to you that we would have to have in order to submit your application to IEDA. And then we would wait to see if it got funded. Now, one of the things that we did last year, normally, as most of you probably know, ECICOG usually does not charge to write an application. What we do ask if we write the application is that you will utilize us to administer the grant if it's awarded. We prepare the Homebuyer Assistance grants that way because we don't have to identify the homeowners in advance, the persons that are going to be assisted with that program. But with the housing sustainability, the owner occupied rehab, since we do have to identify the homeowners, we decided that we need to charge a $3,000 application preparation fee. And that's just because so much of what we're having to do, we're now doing in advance of even submitting that application to IEDA. Whereas before, we used to do that, a lot of that income verification and the environmental things after it was awarded. So that would be another thing that your city would consider, whether they would be acceptable to, if they were doing a housing sustainability application, that they would agree to the $3,000 application fee. And what I did last year is, once the applications were submitted successfully to the state, then I think the month following, I sent an invoice to the communities for whom we had prepared applications through the housing sustainability side. The other thing I want to say about any of these projects, like the Homebuyer Assistance is a fairly easier one to submit. And however, you don't want to submit an application unless you really think you're going to have the interest in it, and that you're going, that you're going to be doing it, because you do not want to submit a CDBG application to IEDA and then not utilize the funds. You want to be able to do that, because that just sets you up for the next time you ask for funds. They'll question whether you'll be able to utilize them if you didn't do it in the past. So it's important to give proper consideration to what you're doing, but I also ask that you do it quickly, because especially for these two, the ones that are being processed by IEDA, first come, first serve, because they will only fund as long as they have funding, and then it's done. And we don't know how long that will be. It could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months, we don't know. 6 months, we don't know.
Let me chime in here for a moment. I see Mark and Derek are having a chat about the fees in the questions. And actually, Tracy, this will be a question for you. So the only application that really requires a fee, the way I'm thinking of a fee, is the housing sustainability application. That's the only one where we actually charge the grantee, the city, or whoever, we charge them a $3,000 application fee, because there's work that goes into getting it to that point.
Right, and there's work with all of them.
Oh, there's work with all of them, right?
But I think the distinction for us became last year, when we realized that they were going to require so much of the work that used to be done after it was awarded. And so we felt like we needed to assess a fee if an application was going to go in, because once you're funded, we already know who the homeowners are.
Mm-hmm.
We already know that the environmental review process has, it's ready to be submitted. And so that's the reason for that.
But the other programs, there is not necessarily an ECICOG fee attached to it, but we would be the ones requesting that we would be the administrator of that grant, because that's kind of how we get paid for helping manage and submit. That's how we kind of help get paid for some of the staff time. So to Derek's question, the fee is only assessed on that housing sustainability application, but right. For the others, it's just the grant. It's a grant. It's paid for through the grant itself.
Yeah. Yes, and the other thing that I didn't say is, oh my gosh. So see, this shows that maybe I should use the word elderly instead of senior. I just had a thought when you were talking about the fees. Oh, I know what it is. The other thing that I have not mentioned with these housing applications, both the home buyer and the housing sustainability do not require a local match by the cities at all. So I think I was at a meeting with Shelley from Central City not long ago, and she was telling other city clerks that their cost, other than the application fee, their only cost that they've incurred has been the publication for the public notice, which was, probably, I don't know, $14, $15. But otherwise, these applications do not require a local match, which is great. That's the way they used to do it 25 years ago. Then they went to having it be competitive and communities putting in a local match. And now they've gone back to not requiring a local match for housing sustainability and homebuyer assistance.
Got it. I don't see any other questions related to the process here. We'll keep moving on. Tom, I think this might be you.
That is me. Yep, I'm going to cover downtown revitalization, which is kind of separate type of CDBG project that's getting funded. I'm working on right now, but it does have some differences from the housing programs. First, the purpose of that one is to address slum and blight. So there's no income qualification for that. The purpose is the preventing and eliminating slum and blight. And I will say too that even Ed Bosch from IEDA, who kind of manages the program, says that a lot of times the blight could be what he calls light blight, where there's some buildings that maybe have like doors or windows that are kind of past their useful life, but maybe they're not like falling out or boarded up or anything like that. So it's worth looking into the program, even if you think you're in like pretty good shape. That there's still a lot of tuck pointing issues that need to be handled in a lot of buildings. There could be facade coverings that aren't in such great shape anymore. So those kinds of things. But for the program, there would be an area within your downtown or Main Street area that you would kind of designate for your program. And then it's a requirement that at least 25% of those would be in fair poor condition to be considered like a slum and blight area. And then there's also a requirement that your city council would have to declare that area a slum and blight area by resolution as part of the application. The program would be a partnership, and this part is a little bit more similar to the upper story conversion, but the grant program would be a partnership with the city and building owners of downtown. So it's a voluntary program. So whatever building owners are interested in participating, they would have to be involved. And the activities that are eligible are facade improvements. So it really is about addressing those public facing issues to kind of provide an uplift for your downtown areas. One other thing that's new to the program is that roofing is also an eligible expense now. There are some limits on how much of the funding can go to that roofing, but it is a newer component of the program that can be addressed. So when you're working on a project, there's a requirement that at least 6 buildings would be addressed. And if you're just proposing addressing the minimum number of buildings, then it'd be eligible for up to $300,000 in grant funding. And then if you want to get the maximum award for the DTR project, it's going to require that you're addressing at least 8 buildings. And that maximum amount is $500,000. There is one caveat to that. If you have an iconic building in your community, that's potentially another scenario, but we would probably just talk to that if it's something you're interested in pursuing. Then there's not the same exact number of building requirements. So let's see here. So you can see on the slide here that the deadline for the application is August 16th of this year. And I would say if you haven't done any work on an application, you would want to start considering work on getting an application put together for next year, because there's quite a bit of work that goes into these projects. Plus there's the public-private partnership too that needs to be coordinated. So with just about 2 months, it's really not a lot of time to do everything that needs to get done. For example, you'd want to, in this project, you'd actually want to procure an architect to work with to help with the slum and blight survey, and then start defining kind of a scope of work about the slum and blight issues that would be addressed by the project. Start putting together a project budget too. You'd have to coordinate with the property owners to figure out who's going to be a participating building, and figuring out what your designated area is going to be that you're trying to apply for. And additionally, for having a more competitive application, if you started on the environmental review process, that can help in the review of your program. And additionally, you'd also want to consider if you've had any assessments done on whether there's potentially eligible historic, if your buildings comprise a eligible historic district or individually might be eligible for the National Register of Historic Properties, because that is going to be part of the review for the program. And with the 3-year timeline for the project, it would be helpful to have that figured out before you're getting the grant awarded rather than after. And then in regard to local match on this project, there's not technically a requirement for local match, but that is part of the review criteria. So where there is more local match, which generally would come from the city and also a contribution from the building owners as well. But if you have more local match, then your application is going to score better by IEDA. So, and then as Tracy went over before, we don't charge a fee for helping to develop the application for these projects. We would just have an agreement that we would do the grant administration once the grant was funded.
So, Tom, can you give an example of Anamosa and their downtown, just the contribution from each entity and how long that process has taken so far?
The process for
when the application was put in, when we heard about the approval of it, that sort of thing.
So I started on that one.
Timeline.
Yeah, I started on that one actually after the process had already started. So an architect had already been procured, and the slum and blight survey was mostly done at that point, but I still spent a good 2 or 3 months just getting it finished up.
Okay.
And for that one, I did get started on the environmental review, so that hopefully we would be in the best position possible for the IEDA's review.
Okay.
So, but I would think, and Derek could probably weigh in on what he thinks might be a realistic timeline for getting that application done. But I think 2 months would really be pushing it.
Yeah. Okay. I did see from Rachel Montgomery, she had indicated that Belle Plaine is interested in investigating this for their downtown. So maybe we can circle back with Rachel.
Yeah, and I think my contact information, I think, is on the last slide here.
Yep.
We could also put that into the chat too.
Sure.
So I'll do that. I'll put my email into the chat.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Program timelines.
Okay, so as we talked about the due dates, so the housing sustainability and then the homebuyer assistance is down at the bottom. Those two are, as we have said, are being processed first come, first served. So they really have priority as far as wanting to start immediately if you're thinking that you would like to do that. The downtown revitalization one, the one that Tom just talked about, that application, as he said, is due August 16th. And then the upper story conversion, the upper story rehab that I talked about, that one is due August 31st. And if you are not already prepared to apply, begin applying for next year's cycle. The CDBG, that, as Tom said, probably applies to the downtown revite.
Okay, so this is our moment for Q&A. There's some contact information. Tom's in there, Tracy's in there, but if there's any questions from our attendees, feel free. I think we've answered all the questions as they've kind of arose for each of these programs. I guess maybe one question I would have, Tracy, in general, sometimes I think folks get a little nervous. I know a lot of our communities and some of our nonprofits, they've got a lot going on. And so I've heard, can you talk a little bit about maybe how we try to make that process not so painful. And after going through a process, you know, what communities' experiences are like. That seems to be a barrier that we've run into, I think.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say we try to make it as painless as possible. We know how busy the city clerks are, and so we try and do as much as we can. Even the things that are required for the public hearing prior to submitting the application, the information that goes out to the public about the program, if we're trying to find home buyers, if we're trying to find homeowners, we try and provide that text. We try and provide it in a format that will fit what the community is trying to do. And I think once they're awarded, Paul has been working on the applications that were submitted last year. Mark has a couple he's working on from years prior. And, you know, they do the work, I think, and provide the information to the cities, whatever they need to do, and instruct them on what they should do in order to move things forward. So I think that we do as much as we can in order to take the burden off of the communities in doing it. It's just, there's just a lot of requirements because this is a federally funded program, but we really try and take that burden off of the communities and do as much as we can.
Hey, Tom, we kind of talked a little bit about matching funds a little bit for the programs that we just went over. Maybe just describe again. I know, Tom, it's not matching funds, but you know, for their participating in some sort of financial means. But for the CDBG programs that are housing, can you explain again, Tracy, what might require matching funds and what doesn't require?
Yep. So the upper story rehab, the rental properties, upper story, that one does not have a required local match, but it is, the application will be competitive. So it's you're going to have to probably show other sources coming into it in order to make it a competitive application at the state. And that could come from local sources, that could come from the building owner. The housing sustainability, the owner occupied rehab, or the Homebuyer Assistance do not require a local match at all. So last year's applications proposed that the total amounts that were being charged for the program, from both, paying contractors to paying us, all of that was covered with CDBG dollars in the application. That's what we proposed. We had none that went in that proposed a local match of any kind from the cities. And then the downtown revitalization that Tom talked about, as he said, that program also doesn't have a set local match that you have to pay, but it's like the upper story rehab in that, you're going to have project costs and you're going to have a limit as to how much you can ask for. So then who's going to cover those remaining costs for the project? And then in so doing, that also helps your application be competitive to be able to have other funds coming into the project. And I don't know, Tom, if you would say that any differently, but okay.
So the most pressing program at the moment is?
The most pressing is if you're thinking of doing a housing application, housing sustainability, or the Homebuyer Assistance, then you need to I would suggest you contact me and let me know that, and then we'll talk about what next steps might be. I think that the first thing you're going to want to do is get your local government's buy-in into wanting to submit an application. For instance, I'm going to a city council meeting next week to talk about the opportunity to see if the council would want to proceed with doing it.
And are there anything you could think of? I mean, we've answered a lot of the questions that I had on my list actually for the end, just through the conversations, some of the similar questions. But are there any other points you'd like to make, Tracy, or any other staff regarding the programs that we've covered?
I'll look to everybody else that's on to see if there's something I haven't covered that I should have.
I just have one quick comment. I don't know that anyone is actually considering a DTR and upper story conversion. but I did ask IEDA about that. And basically they haven't made a decision yet whether those can be run concurrently or not. So if anyone is thinking about it, you can let me know and I'll let you know when I have an answer.
Thanks, Tom. Any other staff members? Okay. That will conclude our, I don't see any other questions from our participants. That'll conclude our, oh, Brittany.
I have one note then for the very end. I'm going to be putting a link to our housing page in the chat here. There you can find, it's currently a link to the webinar registration, but once we wrap up here, there'll be a recording to this webinar that you can point people to, as well as a fact sheet that Harrison put together. So I'm going to just send that out. And there it is.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, these programs can be not complicated, but there's just a lot to go over. And so the one sheet is really helpful for folks just to be able to get their mind wrapped on it and think to themselves, okay, maybe this is something I want to pursue. And I think great contacts for our attendees would probably be Tracy or Tom for the DTR. But Tracy, I know can route those emails to the appropriate staff person. So that may be the best approach there. But I want to thank everyone for participating in our second webinar on the CDBG programs that we have that are coming up and coming due. If there are any questions, please let us know. But thank you all very much for attending, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.